3 years ago, Activision made the tragic decision to fold Vicarious Visions and have the developers instead act as support for the Diablo franchise within Blizzard. Vicarious Visions, of course, being the longtime developers of various ports of the Tony Hawk series, as well as the critically well-received 2020 remake of the first two games in that series. If you had asked me back then, or hell, if you had even asked the Birdman Tony Hawk himself, if there would ever be a follow-up to that remake in the form of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4, it would have been a resounding, yet somber, no. Fast forward to today, and somehow, against all odds, I'm sitting here playing that exact game. But with Vicarious Visions out of the picture, it's only fair to question who Activision would be choosing to helm the project. Boasting a small catalog of original games, as well as providing support for a handful of others, Iron Galaxy seems to have accepted the task. But with the incredibly high expectations set by the remake before it, and Pro Skater 3 being one of the top 10 highest rated games of all time on Metacritic, Iron Galaxy have a lot to prove here. So with all that said, let's see if Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 is a worthy successor, and if it can recapture the magic of two of the series' most beloved games. I'll start with what is arguably the most important aspect here, and that of course is the gameplay. If you played and loved Vicarious Visions' 2020 release of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, then you'll feel right at home here, and that's because the gameplay is almost entirely unchanged. The physics, animations, and general structure are all carried over from the previous remake, and while this does play into one of my biggest criticisms that I'll touch on later, I want to be very clear that I in no way think this is a negative. If we go back and look at the 1 and 2 remakes trick list, it was already based heavily on Pro Skater 4's, so really it only makes sense to reuse it here. We could have easily had a situation where the gameplay wasn't very good, looking at you Pro Skater 5 in HD. So honestly, it would have been an outright shame if it didn't play like 1 and 2, because that remake is up there as one of the best feeling and controlling games in the entire series. Of course, while those remakes added wall plants and acid drops to the trick list, it was missing skitching, which is required for some of the goals in THPS 4, so naturally it's been added in here to accommodate that. Unfortunately, that leads me to my first major criticism with this release. While Pro Skater 3's side serves as a true proper remake with goals remaining basically unchanged, the same cannot be said about Pro Skater 4. Those who remember playing 4 originally know that it was the first entry in the series to stray away from that classic 2-minute timer. Instead, during career mode, each location was its own open zone area where you free skate around the map and talk to people to activate individual objectives. While at the time this was a pretty significant and even novel change to the series, even I can admit that in some ways it has not held up the best. Some of the positives with this change mean that players have the opportunity to freely learn the layouts of locations and discover the best combo lines without the restriction of a timer, while also being able to complete goals at a pace best suited for them. That said, this pace can also make the game a bit of a slog to get through. Having each goal be separate from the rest means that you also don't get the excitement of trying to complete as many of them as possible in one run. But on the flip side, it does mean that objectives can get really creative and far more challenging than the ones in the prior 3 games. In Alcatraz, there's a mission that tasks you with collecting a bunch of items for an inmate in a pretty short amount of time. What's really fun about this goal is that it all but requires you to follow a very specific line going from the top of the prison all the way to the bottom, and is one of the most challenging objectives in the whole game. Obviously, with the goals now needing to be a bit more open in this remake to fit the 2-minute timer, these objectives with far stricter designs end up being cut completely. That's not to say that a lot of the goals from 4's career don't return though, and I feel Iron Galaxy did a pretty good job at implementing them in ways that make sense for the old school format. What I do find to be really nice about this release is that once you complete the main career for both games for the first time, it opens up an entirely new set of pro goals for every map in both 3 and 4. These increase the difficulty significantly, cranking up the score requirements, bringing back the combo letters that were introduced in 4, and adding entirely new objectives that weren't even in the originals. In 4 specifically, many of these goals are actually callbacks or even direct recreations of some of the more involved objectives like collecting all the pink elephants in college or manualing the setup in San Francisco. Unfortunately, all of these can't help but feel like compromises made in service of a change that should have never really been made in the first place. Now, I do want to be very clear that I am in no way trying to throw shade at Iron Galaxy here, as I think they've done an excellent job with the resources at their disposal, and especially when you consider how short of a time frame Activision gave them to make this. I say this because I don't get the impression that the decision was entirely theirs to make. Even back when rumors started swirling about a 3 and 4 remake while still under Vicarious Visions, I was very adamant about 4 being grouped in with the original trilogy. With THPS 4 being such a drastic departure in format for the series, I always thought that it would make more sense to add 3's content as DLC for 1 and 2. Then they could create an entirely new collection with 4, Underground, and Underground 2 bundled together, as these 3 games all have similar structures for their careers. Looking here though, with how dramatically 4 has been neutered, it doesn't give me much hope that we'll ever see the pair of Underground games get remade, especially considering how much more involved their career modes are when compared to 4. Some of the more off-the-wall objectives in 4, like the random mini-games, all of the races, and pro-specific goals like Bob Burnquist's open loop gap or Bam Margera's shopping cart downhill, are completely omitted here. And while things like said mini-games weren't exactly that good to begin with, it does mean THPS 4 loses out on a lot of what made it so unique. There are some benefits though, with both 3 and 4 being set to the classic 2-minute timer now. The incredibly fun speedrun mode can be applied to the pair, and just like with 1 and 2, trying to get the fastest time to complete all the goals perfectly taps into what makes these timed runs so special. Pro Skater 3 was the first game to introduce NPCs to the series, and so I'm glad to see the majority of them make their return, like the pair of friends arguing in LA, and the guys grilling in suburbia. But there's also a few that have gone missing. The characters cut seem to mostly be ones that maybe haven't aged so well, like the bumbling drunk bum in LA, or the Neversoft girls on the cruise ship, but then there's far more tame ones like the guy peeing in Canada that have been removed. Well, kind of. He actually reappears for the pro goals, not relieving himself this time, but more as a cheeky little nod to that, with the goal now asking us to retrieve a giant thermos for him. Much like Vicarious Visions with their pair of remakes before it, the attention to detail by Iron Galaxy when recreating such memorable and iconic levels cannot be understated. Every map has been carefully crafted to strike that perfect balance between being nostalgic while also feeling new and fresh. I love changes to maps like Rio with its mural and graffiti-covered park, London's new nighttime rainy setting, or Canada's particle effects of billowing wind and snow, making it feel so much colder than before. A location like Suburbia gets shifted to a more autumn and Halloween-based theme, giving the map a spookier vibe that better fits the objectives surrounding the Thin Man's house. Even the blatant advertising seen in the originals makes its return here, and while some of them make sense with skate brands like Vans having stores dotted about, the same can't be said about the random Frosted Flakes collab or the Taco Bell restaurants that show up in the maps. This isn't really that far from Nokia or Jeep showing up in the originals, and so if anything, it's kind of nostalgic in a weird, roundabout way. Thankfully for me, I'm not so easily swayed by such simple and blatant marketing tactics. I'm happy to say that even all of the secret areas and map transformations return too. Well, with a slight asterisk on that. For some reason, THPS 3 Skater Island has its outdoor pirate ship area opened up right from the start. The only justification I can see for this is that the indoor park featured on this map is based on a real-world park in Middletown, Rhode Island, that unfortunately had to close after a collapsed roof left the park destroyed back in 2003. The team at Iron Galaxy actually make reference to this by giving the park a bit of a run-down and abandoned look, complete with parts of the ceiling caving in and breaking as you skate around. I'm guessing that having 2 big holes in the wall that lead outside was their way of emphasizing just how dilapidated the park is, but it's still a bit of a strange choice nonetheless. The other park changed here is THPS 4's Zoo, which I feel really got the short end of the stick, as it no longer has its aquarium area accessible and is the only example I've noticed where an area of the map has been cut entirely. If that wasn't bad enough though, Zoo, along with Kona, have been reformatted into competition stages rather than traditional goal-oriented maps. While this does relieve us from having to suffer through the infamous Snake Run Slalom or Misty Flip the Hut goals from Kona, it also means that these maps, Zoo especially, are almost completely devoid of everything that made them so memorable in the original. There's no sketching the elephant, no luring the lions back to their cage, and no collecting the skate camp waivers. I also feel like I should mention that both of the bonus locations from THPS 4 do not make a return here. Since the Chicago map was actually just a port of the same map from sister series Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX 2, I can understand the omission here. But what I am much less accepting of is snubbing Carnival, which I felt served as a nice bookend for THPS 4's career and had some of the best combo lines and most challenging objectives in the game. Instead, as a bit of a compromise, Iron Galaxy have created 3 entirely brand new maps for 4's career: Movie Studio, Water Park, and Pinball, and I have to say, all of them are pretty excellent. Movie Studio is my least favorite of the bunch, with a lot of its lines not feeling like they link up as well as maybe they could, but considering it serves as one of the 3 competition maps and is relatively small, it serves its purpose well enough. Water Park is an exceptional map, with fun and creative goals, a little cameo from Underground's antagonist Eric Sparrow, and just a good time to skate around in. I mean, it's so good and has so much of that Neversoft design ethos that if I didn't know any better, I would swear that it was part of the original Pro Skater 4 the entire time. The last edition, Pinball, is another excellent map and makes for a pretty great way to cap off the game, really capturing the more outlandish charm of the series by shrinking your skater down and placing them inside of a full pinball table, complete with a giant Tony Hawk on the outside commanding the paddles. With the map being based around this concept, there's an interesting dynamic to the map's design in the way everything is slightly angled downhill, as well as having all kinds of overlapping paths, rails, and speed boost. It goes to show that Iron Galaxy are more than just recreating 3 and 4's maps here, but really understand why the series is so beloved and what makes it tick. On top of the new maps, this release also contains the largest roster of pro skaters ever seen in a Tony Hawk game, coming in at 32 total. All of the pros from the original set of games return here, as well as all of the new additions from the 1 and 2 remake. Well, that is except for one single skater. The only pro from the original pair of games not included here is Mike Vallely, and the only reason I can think of for him getting snubbed is that he was originally only included as a secret skater in 4. Regardless of the reason, it's still kind of shitty that he's not here, even stating himself that he had not been contacted, and so for that, he gets one of my honorary Create-A Skater slots. We also almost didn't get Bam Margera either, but with some last minute string pulling, Tony Hawk himself was able to demand Activision and Iron Galaxy get him in the game, even if it was just as a secret unlockable skater. As always, the Tony Hawk series does a great job at shining the spotlight on modern and upcoming pros in the skateboarding scene, and THPS 3 and 4 is no different. Of the 32 pros here, 9 are brand new to the series. These include the likes of 2017 and 2024's Thrasher Skater of the Year, Jamie Foy, Olympic medalist Yuto Horigomi and Haisa Leal, and skating prodigy Chloe Cavell, who, if you didn't know, became the youngest X Games street skating gold medalist in 2023 at just the age of 13. My favorite newest addition, though, is Andy Anderson, who is just one of the most creative skaters out there right now and has that same inventive spirit that Rodney Mullen has. The last inclusion, Felipe Nunes, may not be featured as a playable skater, but it is still so cool nonetheless to see him get a spotlight here. Being implemented as one of the skaters you need to impress on certain maps, he gets his own unique animations and signature pro model deck as an unlockable graphic. Unfortunately, you'll have to find his footage elsewhere because for whatever reason he is the only pro in the game that doesn't have an unlockable video part, which is a real shame because his footage absolutely deserves to be seen. Thankfully, he does get a short moment in the opening FMV, which, as with every entry, is so well edited and just gets you hyped to play this game, fittingly done to the tune of Motorhead's Ace of Spades. On the topic of the soundtrack, it has been yet another point of contention among fans. While Pro Skater 3's opening song has returned, it was really surprising not to see AC/DC's TNT on the tracklist, considering it was used as 4's opening song. In fact, there's very little of the original soundtracks included here at all, only featuring 10 of the total 55 songs between both games. Obviously, CKY's 96 Quite Bitter Beans is going to return, and other tracks like Body Jar's Not the Same, Adolescence Amoeba, and Gangstar's Mass Appeal are back, but there's also some pretty glaring omissions here. Tracks like NWA's Express Yourself, Goldfinger's Spokesman, the Ramones' Blitzkrieg Bop, and for me personally, Alien Ant Farm's Wish, feel almost criminal being excluded. Now, all that bitching aside, it is worth saying that the Tony Hawk series has always served as a place to discover new music, and even though most of the originals are missing, the 50 new songs included are pretty damn good. Some of these are picks from other games like Tony Hawk's Downhill Jam lending us Lupe Fiasco's skating anthem Kick Push, but most are completely new to the series. I could easily pick some of the songs I already know as my favorites here, Run the Jewels, Alice in Chains, King Gizzard, but instead I'd like to highlight some of the ones that are new to me as well. Some of my top picks this time around are the hardcore-inspired tracks like Speed of Light's Kill the Vibe and End Its New Age Slavery, the chilled-out hip-hop of Danny Brown and Abong Jaar's You Know What I'm Saying, and the garage punk sound of Strawberry Fuzz's East of the 405. All of these and others I simply don't have time to mention make for a really great soundtrack that once again captures the essence and spirit of these games as well as skateboarding altogether. Like I said earlier, given the short time frame this game was made in, there's a lot of corners that needed to be cut. Unfortunately, this shows itself the most in the content department. We do get a decent amount of secret skaters here, as on top of Bam and Andy, there's the Ninja Turtles, well, just Mikey for some reason, Birdman, which is the character seen on some of Tony Hawk's deck graphics, and Doomslayer and Revenant from the Doom series. I was kind of thinking someone from SpongeBob might make an appearance too, as there's this little Easter egg on Skater Island where you can go off the side of the pirate ship and dive down into Bikini Bottom, and even see Conch Street off in the distance. But alas, that is the extent of the SpongeBob cameo. The last secret skater here is Constable Richard, who you can acquire by collecting all of these little panda plushies in each location. While this is a pretty fun appearance from Jack Black, it's ultimately just a British reskin of his cameo as Officer Dick from 1 and 2. And that's honestly where a lot of my problems with this game are rooted. The vast majority of content here, outside of the recreated parks obviously, is just the same stuff from 1 and 2 ported over. Create a Skater has practically remained untouched, and with the fact that a lot of pros have seen their sponsors change, means that even though so much of the apparel and skateboard parts are brought over, there's a lot of items that just simply couldn't be. Brands that I've always rocked, like DC and Element, are straight up gone, leaving so many of my favorite shoes and decks MIA. On top of that, there seems to be more of a focus now on these modern and truthfully kind of tacky animated items, akin more to something you would find in a live service type game. You could argue that over-the-top and humorous unlockables have always been a part of this series, but I would say in previous titles those still managed to feel relatively rooted in the tone of the games. A new inclusion here that I do like is that you can apply wear to your deck, grip tape, trucks, and wheels, but once again this seems like an odd compromise. People who played the original may remember that THPS 4 actually introduced a visual mechanic where your board graphic will wear out over time, and even your skater's knees, elbows, and clothes would get bloody, bruised, and torn after enough bails. Having the option to have this wear as a customization option instead of being an organic part of the gameplay once again feels like an accommodation that really didn't need to be made. Beyond just Create a Skater, even the returning pros are just reusing the same body scans from 1 and 2, but with different textures applied and some of the clothing being swapped around. I can't comment too much on this aspect, but from what I can tell, Create a Park seems to be pretty much the same too, although you can add custom goals now, which is honestly a really cool inclusion, and I can see user-made parks becoming really popular within the community. I want to again reiterate though that I don't actually have a problem with any of this. While I think Create a Skater could definitely have been improved in some ways, given the very limited hairstyles and face options, and needing more clothing like backwards hats, body jewelry, and accessories, it really didn't need to be overhauled, just added to. The same mentality applies to the gameplay, pro skaters, trick list, and Create a Park. All of this is why, for me, I feel like they should have went one of two ways with this remake. Either sell it as a very large expansion for 1 and 2, or go the Hitman World of Assassination route, where you can import all of the previous game's content into the new one. Can you imagine how amazing it would be to have both careers, maps, soundtracks, skaters, clothing, parts, and more in one single game? It would be the ultimate pro skater experience, and online sessions would just be incredible. Instead, I'll have to have both games installed just to be able to skate all of the maps I love from both. Now, like I already mentioned, I don't want to knock Iron Galaxy here at all. What they accomplished in such a short amount of time is nothing to scoff at. Most of these decisions come down to Activision, or at least stem from needing to make concessions based on decisions Activision has made. At the end of the day, I'm having an absolute blast with this game, and have already put 50 plus hours into it, completed every challenge, and am working towards beating every single skater's solo tour. While it really should have been a large expansion for 1 and 2, I think what we get here, at least from a biased fan's perspective, is more than worth the asking price. THPS 3's career and maps are beautifully remade, and even though the THPS 4 side has its issues, being able to re-experience all of the iconic maps from that game with a fresh coat of paint has been nothing short of amazing. With the inclusion of 3 new maps that really show off just how much Iron Galaxy understands what makes these games tick, I'm excited to see what lies on the horizon for one of my all-time favorite game series. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4. Hopefully I didn't come across too negative in this review. I mean, know that most of this comes from me wanting the best for the series, and I just feel like this game could have been a lot more than what it was. But enough of my thoughts. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and as always, subscribe for more. With that, I've been TheNamesJER. Thanks for watching. See you later!